Welcome to part two. In this episode, we are going to work on the actual temple buildings that are going to be above my head behind me. And in the main wide shot that you get upon the first reveal of the Western Area Temple, there's about 14 buildings, all of different sizes. There's, I think, 3 or 4 different sizes, varying sizes of the different buildings, plus the various statues that are carved into the cliff face. There's some bridges that you can barely see, that you can see more when they're actually inside the temple. And the one area that they don't show on the wide shot, which is where the cast spends a majority of the time, the area with the fountain in the middle and the big wide wind doors. I don't know what to call them, but where they can block out the elements. I didn't see that in the wide shot. I don't know how big it is in relation to the other buildings, so I'm gonna make it just the biggest one. And behind me is the block palette. It's definitely whiter compared to the sandstone around it, or sorry, limestone around it. So I'm going to go with these following blocks for now, a mix of these for the roof because they're definitely greenish, and this is the best we're going to get. And then it looks like they're capped in some sort of bronze or gold, but I don't really love the metallic blocks that we have, so we're going to go with bamboo. And for the wind doors that they have in one of the episodes, to see if I can like stack birch trapdoors, a whole bunch of them, and have it look like this. It also kind of looks like those the name escapes me at the moment, but those those sliding doors that they have in Japanese houses. That, and then perhaps the bamboo here kind of as like a tatami mat, I think. We'll see. It's the best we're gonna get, that or just carpet. So this is the block palette we're going for, and let's get started. So what we're starting with is the patient zero of the buildings. I build this one right here, and I can copy paste it everywhere else. And because of the style of these buildings, because they're in different tiers that are kind of shaped like a really narrow pyramid, I can just make one big one, and then to make the smaller ones, I can just chop off the top floor or the top 2 floors and pretend that that's the original base. So if I make one really good original, I save myself a ton of work. And what I started with here was first trying to get the shape right and looking at the reference image that is the wide shot. And that was a little bit tricky because we don't have, we're working with cubes. I began with diorite, and eventually I learned my lesson, but I try really hard to find a build where diorite will look good, and I still haven't found one. But beyond the diorite, I found that the prismarine worked really, really well. So it was just a matter of going down slowly, layer by layer, slowly bringing in the walls and adding more of the roof until I could bring it to a satisfying point. And in the reference image, there's about 5 tiers in the biggest structure in the wide shot. I still don't know what the scale is for the big room that they were in, but this is the biggest one that I could manage without it looking too big for the for the hole that I had dug. And I had to move it up because I ran out of space before I would have hit the ground. Now, in the wide shot, there are no windows and there are no big entryways. There's no doors, and it makes it really hard to tell how big they are. And because there's plenty of doors and there's plenty of ways for like the air nomads to like just fly straight through the buildings, but without pulling a million references or a million image references from the different episodes, I wanted some consistency. So I just stayed looking at the wide shot and took some creative liberties. And then we have to move it up one more time to add the final layer, and the final layer's roof and the bamboo cap. And because it was a even block center, we ended up with something a little bit janky. So once I realized my diorite mistake, I initially changed everything to calcite. And my original goal with the diorite was because it was in the shade and because it is abandoned, it looked a lot grayer and dirtier from water runoff, from age, from debris, decay, and all that. But they don't have a smooth version of diorite that isn't like the original diorite. So I switched it to calcite. Still didn't love the calcite, so I ended up switching everything over to the quartz instead of doing the original gradient like I had planned. And I think the quartz ends up looking a lot better, even if it plus the pale oak gives it kind of a pinkish tinge. I think it works really well with the green and the bamboo. And World Edit is really useful, but it does hate stairs. So whenever I'm changing all these blocks en masse, I have to do the stairs by hand. And I was changing the wood out for the pale logs and the pale planks until I realized that I could just add them to different brushes. And I initially messed it up and created a giant block. And then I got the hang of it to make this all a much, much smoother process. I would not be able to make any of this without World Edit. It would take far, far too long. I can't imagine trying to build this in survival mode. And last but not least, we have the doors. And once there's some holes in the structure, I think it looks so much better already. And now we are almost ready to add our buildings to the underside of the cliff, but it's still not big enough, so I had to go in and cut out huge swaths of the sandstone and then start smoothing it out so we can add our first building. And I think the scale right now is perfect. So I went and I added them all around, and the problem with copying in World Edit, at least with at my skill level, is that it also copies the air blocks, so it's a giant rectangle. So if you get it too close to another building, even if there's none of the physical blocks there, the air blocks will be there, and they will cut into whatever else you're pasting into, which I ran into a couple times. I finally noticed the hole that I had made, so I had to go and manually fix that because I didn't feel like copying over the new one when it would have saved me a lot more time. But it's not too bad. You get to see a kind of cross-section of what we're working with as far as the interior goes. and you guys are viewing this with the night vision turned on. But when I was building it before I had the night vision potion on, it is very dark. And because you're dealing with Minecraft lighting physics and not real world lighting physics. So figuring out how to light this thing up without it being too distracting ended up being quite tricky. And as for the big atrium where they spent a lot of time in, I ran out of space. Once I had to choose between the amount of buildings or an accurate size for this central building. And when I couldn't fit any of the original base that I had already made, I ended up having to make this one from scratch. And I'm not 100% sure where this would sit in relation to all the other buildings, but I thought that this was a good spot for it, nice and insulated and toward the back. And then because this was a single block center, I couldn't copy paste any of my other builds, even if I wanted to, so I had to do the whole thing by hand, or from scratch, I should say. And then all we have left is adding the windows and doors, and then the windscreens. And I think they turned out really well, but the area as a whole is a lot smaller than I had wanted it to be, because when they're in the show, I mean, it's probably 20 feet across, easy. But again, I'm not doing this build to scale. It would be impossible to do with Minecraft's world limit, but I think that this is recognizable enough as a space that it's supposed to be in. And all that's left is the little fountain in the middle. And then we need some bridges. In the show, they looked very skinny and very not safe to walk across. So I did my best with stringing the different buildings together in kind of a bit of a haphazard way, so they were a little bit as unobtrusive as I could make them. And then I added some of my buildings that I wanted to the bottom here, on the other side, on the ground on the other side. Just some little temple areas, pagodas. So this was another base building, and this was copied over for 3 others, and then the last one was freehanded. And then this was the third of the copies. And then for this last one here, this one has a 1-block center and it's a little bit different, a little bit skinnier, and a little bit taller. I don't have any idea what these would be used for other than shade. Shade, meditation. And then finally, this is what it looks like with the night vision toggled off. Very, very dark in the back. So I went through and I added some lanterns to the edges, to the corners of every bridge, and then I decided to use end rods on all the corners of the buildings. Because I think overusing the lanterns would have been too much, and end rods are the same color as the quartz and would be a little less obtrusive. And with the last of the end rods, this is about as lit up as it's probably going to be, at least for the temple portion. And I think that's where I'll leave it off for today. This was a lot more work and a lot more ambitious than I thought it was going to be going in. But we have all that behind me and all this under me. And I will do a final fly through just so you can see what it looks like. So when deciding between show accuracy and what would look good in Minecraft, there was a line I had to walk and I kind of zigzagged it a few times. I don't love the bridges, but I was also trying to build this in the name of practicality. And there are air nomads that are not airbenders, and they need to be able to get in between the temples without somebody needing to fly them around everywhere. And in this way, it's a little bit more ADA compliant for Theo there. So it's not done. This is not the end. I still have the interiors to do, all of the floors in every single building, and there's plenty of space out here for a certain red airship and perhaps a sky bison. I've never made an animal at that scale before, but I can't not include Appa. I can't. And also left undone is the forest where Zuko camps and everything, and just to blend this a little bit more into its environment. But that is where we're going to leave it off today. If you enjoyed, thank you for watching, and I will see you in part 3.